So, hello everybody. This is Hank. I'm still missing a coach here, but he's coming just right in. So, welcome to Ops Day. Today is the Ops Day, if you notice. I stared at the agenda for about a week and then realized that all the IoT Ops and then the Ops area, WG, and then the Ops area working group are happening in the sequence today. So, if you are in the Ops area, this is your day, and we're starting light. With a 1-hour IoT operations meeting at the IETF 123. Again, I'm Hank, and this is my esteemed co-chair, Alexei, and we'll walk you through the node well. Assuming that it's Thursday, most of you might probably have seen the node well before. It's how you regulate basically what you say and what happens what you say. If the IETF, please read up on it. In summary, everything what you say will be recorded. If you're not okay with that, you have to keep out the side of line of cameras. Also, you have to note very well that we want to play well together here. So this is like a classroom. We never assume that everything is going well in this node very well. So if you have a problem somehow, how conduct is conducted, then please contact us individually. Contact the AD. Is the AD in the room? Oh, okay, over there. Sorry, I'm short-sighted. So, okay, our esteemed AD Matt. So, so that's very important. So, treat everybody like you would like to be treated yourself. I think is a rule of thumb here. We have a few things. If you go to the IETF agenda, you can log in. There are QR codes here to log in with the on-site tool. That's very important. This is a hybrid meeting. Hybrid meeting means there are remote attendees, and in order to form a queue with people who are not in the room, you must raise the hand in the hands tool. If not, you will be scolded. It's not a super bad thing, but you should adhere to that etiquette. If you find anything like an issue, click. Okay. If you find anything that's not working to your liking, like, I don't know, if you hate it when you rotate your phone that something says don't do that, create an issue on Meet Echo. There's a link here on the slide material that is available on the data tracker also. We are happy for any feedback when you have a technical problem here or at home. We will quickly stop here for the ritual of asking for a note taker. There is a link in the agenda that has a little tiny paper clip, so thinking on the paper, that's the note icon. We need a note taker. Any volunteers for note taking? Michael volunteers, but Michael is also a presenter, so we will need a second note taker. And procedurally, this will not go on until we have a second note taker. So I would like to have a second note taker, please. And we have a second note taker. Thank you. Authority. Just watch and thank you so much. You're aware how to get there? If there are any questions, okay. Wonderful. Thank you for that. That's very appreciated. We have some progress. Something happened last time. Some might remember we rechartered. So basically, the rechartering includes the prominent item of including actual standards track work in the IoT Ops working group now, which is MUD related. Not so surprisingly, therefore, there are at least two newly adopted documents that are MUD documents. And oh yeah, the license one. So one of them are also MUD related. The security summary one somehow, I think I put in the wrong link. I'm sorry for the typo here. That should be a licensing document link. I made a mistake when composing this slides. So we have also already existing documents. Two of them will be talked about today. The security summary document expired. That is due to a lack of participation. And that participation request we enforced on the email list. So we actually have candidates for that, but also I want to highlight this work cannot progress just by Brandon being the single author. We had a lot of valuable feedback that there is stuff happening in other STOs and compliance forming bodies, and we have to conciliate that, but there will be a list thread for that to solicit that help more specifically. So we have a full agenda for today. Sorry for taking so much time. I have to click. It's not my notebook. So the agenda is as written. Is there any request to bash the agenda? We have technically 0 minutes of any other business. So if you're faster than your time, that is appreciated. But if there's no agenda bash right now for another topic, we might not be in need. Going once, going twice. Thanks. And with that, I hand over to Slide Master. Oh, clicker, of course. There you go.
Wait. Well, I need to revoke permissions to the slide clicker. We approve the session. Yeah.
So probably not going to need the 10 minutes for this. So hi, I'm Francesca. I'm going to give you a short update on the comparison of co-op security protocols document. So the status, we completed Working Group Last Call in April this year. That was version 6. The document got updated following the reviews from the Working Group Last Call and got to version 8. And then there was just one version to keep it alive. It was submitted for publication on June 25th, and the AD review was received on June 26th. Thank you, Med, for the review. And so the document is now with the authors to respond to Med's review. This is a pointer to the AD review and a short summary of what the review contained. So there was some requests for more motivation around the need for this RFC. Med requested us to add a new operational consideration section, which we will work on. We will also clarify the terminology used and clean up the references, such as remove expired drafts that don't necessarily need to be there, and then soften some of the language around unstable specs. So most of this is editorial. There is one point I wanted to mention here, which is to add normative references. In fact, right now the document only, it's an informational document and it only has informative references. So we already discussed this with Med, but since he asked to move some of these references to normative, and I went into a bit more specifically if we really need to do that. And I looked into this ISG statement that defines what normative references are, and then when you must use them, and when it's not necessary to do so. And basically, if you read this statement, you will see that normative references really make sense if you're defining a technology, which this document is definitely not doing. This is a really informative document that is, talking about comparison of security protocols. We are not defining a technology, and there is also, I pointed a few examples of informational RFCs that have no normative references. So you can look into it. I'm sure there is way more, but those are just some of them. So our personal preference would be to keep these references informative and move forward with that. And we talked to Med, and Med accepted or agreed, but he said this could come as a comment in the ISG, could come up again. So I just wanted to bring this to the working group, make sure that everybody is aware and that we have some sort of room consensus that we are keeping the references informative. So I will leave like a couple of seconds to see if anyone wants to add something or object. I see 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up, great.
There's some acknowledgement in the audience that is pretty enthusiastic, but it's a few.
Yeah, Okay, so then we have this for the record, and we're keeping the references informative, and if it comes up again, then we can point the ISG to the minutes of this meeting. And yeah, what's next? We will just answer Matt's review. We have some editorial things to work on. We don't think anything big, but we will submit version 10 with that, and then we're ready for IETF last call. That's it.
Thank you, Francesca. Any more questions? Then we can make room for the next presenter, which is the agenda knows. Probably Michael, yeah.
Hi, thanks for coming. So this document is about MUD URLs. It was first adopted, well, it's in the thing it used to be. It's newly moved to this working group. I thought I had a history. Maybe it's in a future slide. It was first adopted in about 2021 to OPS AWG, and OPS AWG at the time had a lot of difficulty processing a lot of documents in a lot of different directions, and I'm so happy that we're doing MUD here now. So what is the issue? MUD URLs come from devices via a bunch of different things, and there are MUD files, and there are some situations where you can simply update the MUD file to do new things, and there are situations where you need to retain the old MUD file, and when a device is upgraded, you need to provide a new MUD file. And one of the critical things about this is that you want to make sure that you're never causing false positives. So what that means is that an alarm goes off on a firewall or intrusion detection system that is using MUD, that alerts an operator that something bad happened, and the operator looks into it and goes, no, that's okay, right? And then after the third time that happens, you know what happens, right? Right? It's the boy who cried wolf. The alarms are ignored, and the value of the system goes to zero. Supposedly, something like 70 or 80% of firewall and alarms are false positives today, costing billions of dollars and requiring excesses of staff to deal with them. And then, as I say, alarms get turned off and we get bad things. So you never want a false positive. It's sometimes okay to have a MUD file that allows for a network access that the device doesn't do or doesn't do anymore. So that's, in sense, I'm not sure that's a false negative, but in that sense. But the point is that you have a rule that says, yes, it's okay to do something, but actually the device never does it. The only time that's a problem is if it says it's okay for someone to access your telnet port from the internet, and that's a problem. But if your MUD file said that, that was probably a problem to begin with, whether the device, had a telnet daemon running or not. Okay, so maybe the issue is you had to put it there and then you turn the telnet daemon off or something like this. So anyway, so there's a bunch of situations where you may update the firmware on a device such that it now does new things, and you need a new access control, a new ACL to allow the new thing. So in a bunch of cases, you can just say, I can update the MUD file in place, add the new permission, and everything's okay. There are other cases where you need to change the MUD file because the old device is going to access service A, and the new firmware is going to access service B, and you do not want the old device having access to service B, but at the same time, you don't want the old device, did I say this right? The old device shouldn't access the new service, but you also don't want the new device to continue to be able to access the old service. So as a result, you would like a new MUD URL that describes the new characteristics of the device. Okay. So there's actually a couple sections in the document that goes through the criteria by which you might update the file versus the URL. So the problem is that the MUD manager gets its URL from the device via a bunch of different things, okay? And one of those ways is, well, directly from an IDEV ID. That's the most secure way because it's digitally signed. But it's also the hardest piece to replace because in order to change the URL, you have to deploy a new IDEV ID, which effectively you never do. That's the whole point. IDEV ID is put in the factory, never changed. You know, maybe never changed even if we had a quantum event. You would hope that you're something else. So the other way that you can get the MUD URL is via DHCP server. So the DHCP, it's the third message, the request that goes through, not the discover, contains the MUD URL. And ooh, isn't that wonderful? The problem is that, well, it's observable, it's in the clear, it's changeable, and it's easily faked by malware. So if in fact your device is infected in some way, then one of the things they could do is say, here's a URL that lets me attack the things I wanted to attack, and talk to my command and control channel, and the alarms never go off. So isn't that wonderful? So you can also do this with LLDP, and it's marginally more secure because LLDP only travels, you know, as far as the first, you know, managed switch, essentially. It's much harder to mutate on the wire. But on the other hand, it's as easy in theory for malware to change it as anything else. You might have to toggle lower level bits to make that happen. But you know, if your device is a, you know, Raspberry Pi sized system, then it's not a hard boot. So what's the issue? So there's the IDEV ID. If you're onboarding with the IDEV ID, then you have that problem. So there could be a lie in what's going on, and you could wind up with a malicious MUD file there. So the shape of the solution that we're proposing is basically the device tells the world about its IDEV ID the first time using the IDEV ID, and you can trust on first use for the DHCP or the LLDP if you prefer, or, you know, there's different ways of doing this, but that's the first round. The first URL comes that way. And there you go. So then the second time, so you get it through all these different ways. The second time that you do it, you would be restricted to changing only the last component of the URL. So I think I have an example here. There we go. So, you know, if the first time was printer 4567 was the model, mud001.json, and then you have a firmware update, the new URL could be mud0002.json, but you can't change it to, example here, gamepad2, or you can't change it to away from example.com. Okay, so that would not be allowed, that update. Attacker.example.com, also not allowed. So basically you can do this change in the last component because that's an acceptable change because we haven't changed the origin, probably haven't changed the model. It's just an update. Okay, yeah, there was the history. So the other thing you can do is once you have this new MUD URL, this new MUD file, in the MUD file, there is in fact a URL of the MUD file. So that one could now be, let's say, yourexample.com, and you get, you know, acquired by, you know, Fubar. That's a company too in Finland too. Some other company, right? Then you would put the new URL in the old MUD file. That gives you a new basis, and then, well, the new MUD files can be against the new URL because, again, it's only the last part that changed. But within the MUD file, you basically can ratchet up, if that's the right way to say that. Contingent, of course, upon the signature being checked by the same thing that's signed before, and there's some text in the document that explains about the stickiness of the signature. So that's, I think, the almost last slide. So it was adopted in January 2021 and operated. They were busy. It's been stable for a while. Almost got to working group last call. Now it's moved to IOT Ops. I believe it's pretty much stable. Please read it. This is a new working group, new comments, new resetting. So please read it. Please, I'm happy to take comments. Something that occurred to me earlier this week is that this is normatively updating 8520. It is changing behavior. And I realized, oh, I don't know if we're allowed to change an ISC document protocol from a working group on standards track. I kind of assumed that was okay, but maybe someone has to double check that point. That's it. Any questions? I think I went talked really slowly.
John in the queue.
Yeah, not directly. You mentioned dev IDs and that they live for basically the lifetime of the device. Is there ongoing work to make dev IDs introduce post-quantum algorithms?
I've heard that there is an effort within the IEEE, or is there going to be an effort? There's going to be an effort at the IEEE to write a profile, a quantum safe profile, and probably a hybrid profile. But fundamentally, we have to finish the work in LAMPS before they can specify the certificate that they're going to sign. Yeah. Right. So I think it's a trivial thing of pull out RSA, ECDSA, insert hybrid, blah, blah, blah. Right. And you're done. But of course, you have to redo your whole PKI and all this other stuff there. But as several people have said, you know what? It might be okay if you onboard the device with an IDEV ID and then immediately deploy a quantum safe LDEV ID. Okay. And that window of attack may be small enough that it's okay for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because so it makes sense.
Not really relating to this document at all anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for the info. Governments are now requiring like all deployment should be 100% PQC 2035. If they really mean that, it's quite urgent to start.
Yeah. So I'm going to not say more because I don't think we have time. Go ahead, Carsten.
I have a quick question. 8520 is a standards track?
Nope. Went through the ISE.
It doesn't know that.
Okay. It doesn't say that in the document?
The document says standards track. Oh, I'm really mishandling my laptop right now.
Oh, well, as far as my memory, and maybe Elliot's on the...
Somebody should...
Elliot is the ISC, but when it went through the ISC, as he's the author, he was not the ISC, and I'm pretty sure it went through the ISC. Maybe it was AD sponsored. Maybe I'm confused. We'll double check that. If it's an AD sponsor, it's a standards track. It went through the AD. Okay, I withdraw my point. It doesn't matter. Okay, we can obviously update our own documents. I thought it was ISE. Okay, any other questions?
There's a comment from Christian on the chat. I can just read it out loud. I like new URL in old mud file way better than limiting which parts of URLs can be touched, but there may be good reasons. And if you would like to explain these good reasons.
So those are not mutually exclusive things. The limiting how much of the URL you can change is how you get to the new mud file. Then you can put a new URL, a new base URL in that, which would then let you move from, example.com to newowner.com. Or if marketing insists that you have to reorganize your website, you could leave the old things there. But yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. It's a two steps of doing it.
Well, thank you. And Christian, if this doesn't help you really well, then we can continue this on the list, of course. Next up, and I pull the agenda up, which would be smart, is Mike. No, maybe it's Carsten.
Carsten.
Yeah.
What?
The license.
Not this.
Not this license. I don't know why it's starting the way.
Okay, I could already say out of about 100 internet drafts I have contributed to, this is the most boring one. That's not the right slides. No, that's the wrong version that I submitted before. You need to refresh your Meetecho.
I did.
You did.
Mm. We very proud.
Yeah, but I can talk anyway. So basically, the problem with MUD files is they can be copyrighted. And actually, they are born copyrighted, even if you don't think they are. So given that they are works, they have an owner. And this owner has to license its usage to you if you want to do significant work with it. And for MUD files, this is kind of important because you actually want to put them into collections. So you can check them against what you actually find somewhere and so on. All the kinds of analysis you want to do on them depend on being able to put them up somewhere.
I think we found your new version. So
Good.
it's like
Yeah. The next slide would be the Yang. You can see that the Yang is pretty simple because it, yeah, thanks. I just said that. Thank you. So this is the Yang, or actually the tree mode, because nobody wants to read Yang. And this essentially says we augment, we provide an augmentation, which is 0 more licenses, and each license has an owner name and 0 more license types. And license types can be SPDX, because that's the way we usually put in license types these days, or they can be any generalized URI if for some reason SPDX doesn't work. So that's the technical content of the document. And I have 2 questions. The first one is this the right way to express the ownership and license type information? So I've zoomed into the tree here. Do we need to put in anything else? Or can people process them based on this information? So this is question number 1. And question number 2 is using a Yang augment the right way to do this? And I'm definitely not a Yang expert. So I need more help on question 2. I'm not a lawyer either, so I need help on question 1 as well, but that's where we are. I'm expecting a rush to the microphone now. If that is not the case.
That is the case. I just didn't rush.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
So this is Hank, Node Share head on as SPDX contributor. There is a version 3.0 now that is released. This is a relatively old document. Maybe have a look how licenses are done there. If you want to have I see SP tag, it's the whole SBOM structure probably. You want to have a dedicated subset requirement of what must be in that tag, I assume, to get these licenses out of there, because you can very easily create an SPDX 3.0 tag without any license information in it. And so maybe you have some requirements on your payload here.
Okay, maybe SPDX tag is not exactly the reference, the name we reference in the
yeah, there is a list. There's actually an attribute, so an element type that lists all the potential licenses, the 400 whatever plus licenses of there. Maybe just say you are enumerating those, or how to identify them. Or maybe it's a full text string. It has to be really clear what part of SPDX you're reusing here, so you're not to expect a SBOM or something.
Yeah, so we already did one major upgrade when SPDX changed from 1 point something to 2 point something.
Yeah, and the 3 point something is more crazy, so I'm very sorry, but you have to have a look again.
Okay, thanks. That's really useful input. And somebody else is in the queue?
Michael Richardson. Your Yang is probably fine. Modulo, I guess you're saying that we're referencing the wrong thing. Looks fine to me. The bigger story is that MUD uses a kind of bespoke extension mechanism that I don't think was well reviewed at the time. And I would like to generify it. And I'm having difficulty getting netmod, netconf to review the concept. But I believe that augment is incorrect. I believe that produces the wrong answer based on the extension mechanism. I believe it just winds up having to be a grouping that we create. But or even not, just no augment at all. Okay, I believe that is how it's supposed to work, and augment produces the wrong answer. But ideally, the Yang people will correct us and there. So this is, I think, the first trivial extension. I believe the TLS MUD extension also got it wrong.
Okay, so
Okay.
maybe we can ask the chairs to initiate an early review from the young
Yeah, in
people.
fact, I have a document that tries to explain this,
Yeah.
but I haven't been able to get enough eyes on it from
Yeah,
the Yang side of things. So it's really, I think, actually a question of pigeonholing some people in the hallway. But anyway,
okay.
that's my comment is
Yeah.
that I think everything's fine. You won't be more wrong. It won't be more wrong than what we've already done. But I think it's wrong. But I think it's subtle enough that it almost doesn't matter.
Okay. Good. So we have the SPDX update. We have this check with the young people. And if we manage to fix them on the mailing list, I still would like to ask the question, is this something we should do a working class call for then?
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
Good.
So coming up next in order is the new ID about MUD queries and Michael's work.
You should probably all just line up the microphone now.
Hold on, this is the inventory thing.
MUD query, yeah. So that's the document. It was written, I think, before the last IETF. There's not really any changes, but this is the first time it's been talked about. So what is it about? So there's a whole bunch of IDS systems. Everyone has one now with AI. They use a variety of heuristics over, I think, I remember Snort, to discover what kind of systems are out there. TCP doing, good old nmap TCP fingerprinting used to be useful. And now, of course, the answer is it looks like Linux, because it probably is, but that doesn't tell you what device is really there. They're often wrong. With randomized MAC address, if people do that for IoT devices, and I kind of think they shouldn't, but if they do, then that can also result in double counting, because the device shows up and then it shows up and then it shows up and people look at logs. One of the other side of this is that there are these new regulations, both in the CRA in the UK and California, about a variety of things like no default passwords and stuff like this. So one of the questions is, so I send one device that costs, $50 to the regulator to review, but then I use the $20 platform instead for the supply chain that looks exactly identical. But how could anyone tell? So the question is like, do you actually need to have a strong identity to be able to apply regulations properly? Bad guys have the heuristics too to find devices. They're usually better than the good guys, and that's a problem. So there are privacy. So what is so what could we do? Well, somehow, if we could get the device to use its IDEV ID, whether it's quantum safe or legacy, in a protocol, then we could have a strong assurance that the device, is what it says it is, and has essentially a kind of endorsement from its manufacturer that who it is. and whether the IDEV ID includes the serial number or just the model up to the manufacturer. And it can contain a MUD URL, which we just mentioned, right? So there's an increasing need, it's increasingly available, and there are efforts to make it ubiquitous. But if I just see a device on the network and it hasn't onboarded, then how can I find out what it is? And so the idea is, well, you know, get it to respond to a TLS connection. If we can do that, and it uses its IDEV ID in that, then we're done, right? So that's, you know, kind of it. But, so people say, well, won't the bad guys discover all my devices? And the answer is yes, they will. But they already know about your devices because they have better heuristics than the good guys. That's my opinion, okay? And so I think it's better that we help the good guys make a good inventory and not worry about what other happens, okay? But random people could scan my network, you know? They could find out what devices. They may be, you know, people in my home that I sort of otherwise trust, but somehow I don't want them to know what all the devices on my network are, or in my office or something else like that. Yes, that's true. That is a concern, okay? So one answer is just don't put random people you don't trust on that network, right? Maybe that's a, you know, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Actually, it does. So, you know, don't do that, right? That's one of the answers, is maybe that's a problem if you have random people that can scan your network. Okay, so what is my proposed solution, right? So you make a list of devices from some kind of a table, ARP, V6 neighbor table, bridge forwarding table, Wi-Fi, you know, things. They all have list of MAC addresses and often link layer, V6 link layer addresses, and IP addresses of various kinds. So that's just a list from my laptop from a little while ago. And so then you make a connection over a IPv6 link local connection to some port to be determined. IANA already scanned our my document and told me I need to fix the IANA considerations. I'm like, yeah, well, we haven't even got there. Do TLS, and you're done, because it answered, right? That's enough. You don't even have to send any bytes in the TLS. You just, you know, get the certificate and you disconnect. And Hannes wants to say something. This is a good time to say it. And that's why I wanted 5 minutes for talking and 10 minutes for a discussion.
Michael, do you expect that device to implement TLS server functionality?
Yes.
What about DTLS as well?
We could do that.
DTLS?
We could live with that. I consider DTLS almost more complicated than TLS. From a software stack point of view, it's harder to use. But yes, could be DTLS.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now you have to try two things, but sure.
Right. And then ad hoc, and then.
Well, then where would you need
So
ad hoc?
then it doesn't provide you a certificate because.
Well, but if it doesn't use a certificate, then you're not getting any benefit.
But why? What's wrong with the approach of using sort of like when a device does the initial onboarding, you should get that information already.
Yes.
Because that would be like from some of the networks that benefit from that, they would run through that. You mentioned OPC-OA, that's type of, it does this IDEF to LDEF ID transition, so the network would actually know about the devices it has attached to it.
So if you already know about the device because it's onboarded securely,
mm-hmm.
then you probably don't need to ask it again, okay? Of course, that device might be deployed in other contexts where it doesn't get onboarded that way. The device might be wired, so it never actually did an onboarding process, okay? Or it might be that it's reasonable to get your, refrigerator firmware updated to do this with an IDEV ID that it already has, but it's not doing onboarding. Or the onboarding was, you poked the screen and typed in your WPA home network password, with your TV remote. It took you an hour to do, but you did that, okay? That's how it onboarded, not some newfangled way, but it could still answer, the question, who are you?
Yeah, the difficult part is really, and maybe this needs something simpler than TLS also.
Yes?
Because you're essentially saying like, oh, the device for some reason didn't bother to, or that the developers didn't bother to implement the onboarding protocol or use it in any reasonable way for whatever bad reasons, because I think it's a very useful thing to do. And now you want them to implement some others so that they can be detected, a problem which they most likely are not going to see. So like having something really simple that they, I'm just making this up here right now.
Yeah.
The microphone.
So like,
maybe there's nothing
like
simple.
they could sign their DHCP request asymmetrically with RFC 3111. I've done that 20 years ago. It's doable, right? Just nobody ever went anywhere with that.
Yeah.
Okay. And particularly in an enterprise situation, that DHCP process, even getting the MUD URL through that process takes a lot of, plumbing to places that, people didn't touch previously, right? So I'm proposing doing this as V6 link local, which means that the inquiring box has to be on the local.
I think tying this to MUD is probably also wrong.
Okay.
Because like that could be useful even if you don't have MUD.
If there's no MUD URL, there's no MUD URL.
Yeah.
If there is one, you can find it from the IDEF ID, and that's nice. Okay. And if there isn't one, you still get the identity of the device.
Yeah, because there's also the question of whether we would just want to focus on IDEF IDs, because they are also like previously we entertained the idea that raw public keys would be much better because it's not so much overhead than X549 certificates. So we did that.
Right.
Obviously, then you don't have that certificate. We did BSK because that was also more lightweight.
Right.
We like that. And then we had all these variants like CBOR, COSI, sort of mechanisms that you could potentially also use. And they obviously don't have those elements either in there. So maybe there's something else that could be done.
I agree with you. There's other possibilities here. And if you look at my draft, there's 2 pages of why and 6 lines of how. Okay, because I didn't see there's any point in detailing it extensively until we agree, that there's a problem statement that we want to deal with. I'm just going to go through 2 more slides, but please interrupt me because some of this is covered. So I said, let's use V6 link local. So that means that anybody who does it has to be on the local link, right? In a place with many different networks, that means you may have to have probes that are on many links, but you know what? IDS systems in enterprises are used to this kind of thing anyway. Does not require a new discovery mechanism. So I'm not trying to use, I didn't use MDNS specifically for that because it may answer and it may not, but it also doesn't particularly help the situation, right? There's strong device identity since we have a certificate signed by the manufacturer. It does push MUD a little bit because it provides a very, obvious place that you can put that there. And there's a thing that's collecting the information, would love to have that information as well. We could further restrict it by saying the source address has to be whatever you heard your router advertisement from, but that presumes that there is V6 active on that link, whereas I'm saying actually you just use V6 link local because it's probably already available. And there's very little systems that, actually don't have V6 in their kernel, even if they're not using it, right? So there's lots of IoT devices where, the cloud provider doesn't have any V6 live, but their devices, are running Linux kernels, which already have V6 and they don't even know they have it, but they would just use it for there. And MUD provides, if you get the MUD, then it provides anchor for other uses. And this is partly where I think. So so the problems with this one, you require a minimum V6. We could consider using IPv4 link local, but the problem is that IPv4 link local is not configured on most devices if you get a DHCP response. Some devices configure both, many devices say, as soon as I get a DHCP reply, I do not do link local. And it's only they do link local when they get nothing, right? So yeah, okay. We could just say you're going to do it over v4 on the same subnet as you have RFC 1918. You can say that's acceptable. The reason why you don't want to let random things is because assume that someone has a port forward or something else, you know, copies and pastes from that bad thing into their router and opens up a port that lets some external entity scan them. That would be nasty. But also there's all these ARP spoofing attacks where you spoof the default router, often intentionally. It's not an attack. It's how your VPN that lets you watch, you know, foreign Netflix works, right? So like, now I don't really want to go there. I don't want to encourage that, but also don't want to require it. You require an IDEF ID in the device. So if there isn't one already, a firmware update's probably not going to get you one unless, but you could do it. You could, the vendor could do that. They could involve an enrollment in something like this. And there's probably other issues. So then I have related things. And this is what kind of, I kind of wrote this and I said, well, what's it going to be useful? And if you look, the related thing spells rats. And so one of the situations is, well, we want to do continuous assurance. We don't really have a protocol that lets us do this, right, for random devices. We have ancient documents, RFCs in the 5000 era of network endpoint attestation, NEA. It's a pretty fat protocol, okay? And no one really implemented it, okay? So this would let you basically collect fresh evidence regularly. And over in the ad hoc, Lake Working Group, they're discussing exactly this question of how to issue continuous assurance. And actually, so this could, if the thing that you're actually going to send over this protocol might actually now be your remote attestation, and it could be shared with what's happening in Lake for there. So the biggest objections to me is that you need to get vendors to do this, and they already didn't do this, and they already didn't do a lot of other things. So this would be yet another thing they didn't do. Like we would find an RFC that no one implements, right? So that's the question, like, you know, is it worthwhile? And the last point is, well, can we get the regulators to say, if you don't do this, you don't get a stamp? That would be lovely. The stamp is you require strong identity to know which device you've given the stamp to. Otherwise, what's the stamp is meaningless. Go ahead.
Michael, judging from the regulation we've seen in this space, you probably you cannot rely on a regulator to ask to describe the solution that you want. Because that's always the last resort of engineers. Like if something doesn't get market traction, you basically demand the regulator to enforce it.
Agreed.
And typically what you think you ask is then not what you get either. So even with the most recent Cyber Resiliency Act in Europe, it basically is, of course, further work is ongoing about detailing it. Is currently, it's like, yeah, so, super high level.
Right.
Nobody knows what that means. And
so the UK and California, and I'm unclear whether it's still US wide, but definitely California. UK and California IoT regulations, which require no default passwords, upgradable firmware, and a vulnerability reporting system, and there are other points. But those are very narrow things, and they haven't actually enforced any of that yet, even though it's been over a year in the UK that it's been law. But again, I think one of the reasons why it's hard to enforce is that you don't actually know what any device is, right? So like if you were to scan a network and see some devices and you say, well, do these devices have a vulnerability reporting scheme? Well, you have no idea, right? At all.
Michael?
Yeah, we're out of time.
You were asking a question, which basically, is this interesting? Do you want to have a quick session hand pull for that?
Yeah, okay. You got one? Yeah, all right.
Yes.
Okay. There we go.
And now you have to have the chance to have an opinion or no opinion.
So I can go behind the poll.
Always an option.
You can change slides behind the poll.
I'll give a flying rat's beep about this.
Ooh.
And if you have not signed into the on-site tool, this is the moment. It also always helps us to.
Why you should have.
Exactly. I forgot to say this at the start. It helps us count the people in the room and make better planning for the next meeting. So I always forget to say that. So I'm giving this 10 more seconds. And I didn't even count, but there's one more. There you go. Push. So there's no objection, and we have about 50 people in the room, and I'm not counting Zulip, and therefore it's a healthy amount of people, either 7 no opinion or 13 yes. That goes into the meeting minutes, please, and thank you.
And please cost me to co-author, because I would love more help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael is not.
I'm really not attached to any one protocol. I'm really attached to the problem. Right. Yeah.
And the document is clear.
Okay, thank you.
Quite immature.
Yeah, there are a lot of sections of
TBD.
saying TBD and hello and yes. So we'll check on the mailing list about adoption. Yes.
That's a good point. Yeah. Looks like a good start. So again, there's someone in the queue. Oh, Andrew, thank you for highlighting that, Carsten. Andrew, please. If you still want to. In order to speak, you must unmute. There's a button in MediaCo, or lower your hand if you're in the queue by accident.
We're out of time, though.
Yeah. Maybe post your question to the chat. And we'll gracefully
Okay.
put you on the queue.
Right. Last presentation.
Yeah. I assume Jim is presenting? Oh, and you both, okay. Yeah, there's enough room up front, yeah. And there's no box anymore. And, yeah, but no stars when you get in the X.
Yeah.
So why bother? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so sorry. So today, myself, Abhishek, and Jim Mosley, on behalf of INRIA, UCL, and Infoblox, I'll be talking about DNS security and privacy guidelines, but catered to IoT. So you might ask first, why IoT? So we have multiple guidelines for DNS in general. So we thought of multiple reasons why we went through just for the IoT. First one is, so we will focus on IoT specific DNS threats, which might not be seen in a general OS behavior. For example, concerning the endpoints that these IoT devices connect to. Second is the resource constraints. So because of the resource constraints, so this DNS misimplementations or attacks could be amplified, mostly operationally. Third, IoT devices generally lack security agents. Fourth, what we saw is these queries in IoT devices are quite repetitive and predictable, especially on the start. So they are more prone to fingerprinting attacks, for instance. Next, and then there were a couple of benefits that we were thinking that might be useful to have it catered to IoT. For example, we have multiple DNS RFCs, but for the vulnerabilities that I will discuss next, so I hope our kind of BCP will address directly to those. And we also think that our draft will help us to help the network security management people, for example, in managing large-scale IoT deployments, majorly with IoT devices misbehaving still, let's say. And we also want to help this as a guide to manufacturers, for example, who have this software implementation that might ignore DNS in the first place, but our draft should help them. So this is based on some research that we did, which we presented in NRW at this IETF. So what we did is that UCL, we have 30 devices, IoT devices, reflecting a wide range of devices that is there in the typical smart homes. And we took the threat model that is a bit more generic. So we have both passive threats where somebody is listening onto the DNS traffic locally, but also active attacker where we assume that he has access to the resolver and can craft replies. So we have both these experiments extensively done, and then we compiled the list of vulnerabilities that we found. So from security point of view, we saw, for example, there is no support of secure standards like DOS, T, or Q, for instance. We found many security vulnerabilities. For example, this source port randomization and transaction under ID randomization was quite poor. We saw then we did we changed the responses, for instance, from various perspectives. So for example, changing multiple replies to a query, or for example, amplifying the response size. And what we saw is like a majority of the devices were indeed affected operationally. And more so from a fingerprinting point of view, we saw that we were able to fingerprint more than 98% of the devices just based on the startup traffic. So so that was there. From the behavior perspective, we also saw many uncompliant behavior. So for example, they didn't adhere to TTLs that they received. There were lack of any cache or adaptive caching mechanisms. We blocked, we made them follow the resolvers based on the DHCP offer, but they were still contacting hard-coded DNS servers. The queries were quite high and repetitive in nature, and especially tenfold high when the resolution fails. And and also the support of EDNS 0, for example, was lacking limited IPv6 support. And then lastly, we also looked into, okay, so we have this bunch of vulnerabilities that we found and that are clearly significant, but is there already a framework that addresses these? So we looked into current international bodies, for example, ETSI, NIST, ANISA, ISO, IEC, and we didn't find any which is for DNS specific, but specific to IoT. And then I will let Jim speak more.
Is it okay for you to take questions
Yes,
now?
we can do
Hannes
it
is in
now,
the queue,
or-
and yeah.
Yes.
If you go back to the previous slide, I was wondering what type of devices you have looked at. Are those like high-end devices, embedded Linux device, or some other?
From all ends, from smart plugs to smart TVs. So-
Right, but do you know what's running on them? Because the question I'm trying to get at is, for some of those devices, they just run an off-the-shelf embedded Linux. So probably the guidance that is generic for DNS on like laptops would equally apply, versus the case where you're looking at very constrained purpose-built devices where you try to squeeze out the maximum in terms of like reduce the code size as much as possible. And there you often find very restricted DNS implementations. That's sort of like I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah,
which
quite right.
side are we talking
Quite
about?
right. But it's I will say, let's say 85 or 80 to 85% of devices are resource constraints, like kettles, like kettles, for example, like smart kettle or
That's also a
Yeah.
good point, because then I think what you call security problem or privacy problem with DOE and the different variants, I would call that actually a feature, because I don't think these devices even fall under the notion of like privacy, because they are like, with privacy protection, you want to have data that is bound to an individual, or you want to identify an individual. With a kettle, I'm not identifying any individual, so it has no privacy rights. Like a bridge, a sensor in a bridge has no privacy rights. And so the vendors of those devices probably didn't see the need to protect that type of information. And in case of DOE, it would be the information is DNS over HTTPS, or the DNS over DLS and DNS over QUIC. They wouldn't protect the information, the DNS part, and also the DNS lookups, and also not the SNI exchanged in TLS. So I wouldn't even expect to see that. And from my experience, like there's no code in any of the libraries. Like you look at Wolf SSL, you look at Embed TLS, you look at TinyD TLS, etc. You won't find code of this because nobody has that use case there.
Yeah, so it's more than identity, it's also like the class of devices. So for example, imagine an attacker knowing what kind of devices you do. So we even saw that. So what we did is, currently they don't have a DOH. We forced them to go on DOH, for example. And we saw that even with DOH, you can infer the class of devices by just looking at packet size, for example, or IAT, for example. So it needs, so we even for making them not infer the class of devices, you need DOH, DOT, but on top of padding and maybe some jitter in timing domain as well to let this fingerprint be less potent.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe there are general objectives and problems with fingerprinting. So we are officially at the top of the hour. I allow for, yeah, exactly. I allow for you to finish the slide deck, but please excuse fleeing participants.
So I'd need to make it quick. We've got mitigation in the draft that was published on Sunday, uploaded to the tracker. So definitely please have a look at that and welcome side discussions on DNS mitigations. So 3 areas: on the device itself, on the network resolver, and on the authoritative server. I think we've covered encrypted protocols. Obviously the devices should honor discovery mechanisms like DHCP, RA, etc., to get the network resolvers they should use, and not just pick some like open resolvers. Randomization of source ports, transaction ID is a problem. There are RFCs already for that. EDNS 0 has been mentioned by Abby. Clients should cache. There might be some things that can be done on the client or the resolver, certainly the resolver, with things like min and max values for caching, if that can help things operationally too. DNSSEC validation, that appears in 2 places. That should definitely be done by the device manufacturers for the authoritative zones that they're doing, and so it can be validated on the resolvers. Serve stale would help things operationally. If these resolvers are not able to get an answer, that can be used to provide one. And there was some stuff in the research that was seen related to that, and devices doing excessive queries. Operators where they've got dedicated networks may want to do things with the resolvers to prevent the security risks of open DNS resolvers being used, or block well-known, block with well-known resolvers. And lastly, manufacturers should definitely publish the management domains they are using. Because if the device is compromised, it's going to go clearly to probably some other domains. So having that list will enable network resolvers to secure things. That would certainly help threat researchers in mitigating risks. That could be delivered perhaps by just manufacturers providing a list, or by mud files or whatever. Very quick whistle stop there.
Yeah.
So feedback appreciated. As I say, the draft was only uploaded on Sunday, so very much welcome contributions on the list, talk on the list, etc. For instance, do we need more why in the draft? That was a comment from Elliot. We could perhaps need more why. And slightly to your point, how much intelligence, DNS intelligence, if you like, should be on the devices versus how much should be on the network resolver in terms of mitigation. I think we've got a question.
Yeah, well, we have one person, the individual in the queue. If Daniel, if you would like to speak up, we are over time in any case.
Okay, I'll keep this very brief.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that I think that this makes sense, and I think that one element of why that you might have actually challenges the previous question's assertion about the individual identification or identifiability about many of these devices. You know, your smart toaster is typically something that you'll only have one of in your household. This is individually identifying. A bridge perhaps is a better example of one where there's a sort of idea of anonymity on the roadway, but your toothbrush, your TV, even your smart plug is very likely to be something that can be associated with an individual identity or household.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a why.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you for this. Let's keep discussing this on the mailing list, and we'll see how it progresses.
Please do.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So, thank you. Right.
Thank you all for coming. I think, yeah, we're slightly over time.
Yeah.
The session is closed.
Session is closed, and enjoy Ops Day.
All right.